All right, let's give a round of applause for Fonz from tokenproof, Ariel Wengroff from Ledger, Devan Mitchem from Google, and Sam Ewen from Coindesk, our moderator today for brands, blockchain, and loyalty.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Celo, for the air conditioning and the space and the opportunity to have this conversation. I'm very excited about it. I think this is going to be a great conversation with some amazing folks here. I'm Sam from Coindesk, and I'm going to be your guide on this little trip. We framed this conversation around the idea of brands, blockchains, and loyalty. I think I would love to understand a little bit the makeup of this audience. So can you raise your hand if you're a developer? All right, we got one. All right, this is going to be for you, bud. So can you raise your hand if you're like a marketer? Oh, okay. If you're like trying to build a brand? How about services? All right, you two back there who have not raised your hand, what are you guys here for? You're what? Auditor. Oh, okay. HR, even better. Fonz, keep it clean.
Yeah, I'll be careful. the adults in the room.
All right. I'm going to start by saying my least favorite phrase that we all say is about how are we going to onboard the next 100 million people into Web3? I find that my least favorite for two reasons. One, because I think a lot of the people who are saying it are because they're desperately trying to find someone to buy the NFT they overspent for, and therefore they want a lot more people with money that's not already in the system to pay for it. The other reason I don't like it is I think it sets an unrealistic expectation for a technology. And I think that whether we believe we're early or we're late, we know that there's a lot of stuff still to come. And I think the final form that this world that we're all involved with takes isn't going to look exactly like it does today. So I think it's important that we kind of acknowledge that for good, because I think these folks up here, everyone in the room, it's our job, it's our responsibility to take kind of ownership of the narrative and say, what do we want this to be? And let's not sort of make it be the thing that we didn't like the way it looked like in the past. I think it's really interesting to have this specific three individual that represent three groups of types of businesses here, because I think each one of you work with brands, are a brand, are doing things that are helping to move us forward in different ways. I'm going to want you to introduce yourself, but I was just going to monologue for a few. So when I think of what Devan on the end is doing at Google, and I spoke with some of your counterparts at our conference, Consensus, we met with the Web3 team there, I was just really enthused by the fact that Google wanted to play with us. Like, I thought that was to me, it was a big bullish sign of that there's an acknowledgement, whether it's through cloud, whether it's through the Play Store with what you're doing, hopefully we'll talk about a bunch of those things, but just the fact, the acknowledgement of one of the world's biggest brands that runs a lot of the infrastructure of the world, the technological world, is like getting in the mix with us, I think is an amazing sign. And I think it's something that we should not take light, even those of us who may feel certain sort of sentiments of not wanting to play with the man or whatever. Like, it's a good thing that Google wants to play, right? I think of what Fonz is doing here in the middle, and Fonz, you know, his origin story is amazing. I'm not going to make you tell it, but you should ask him to tell it to you afterwards of how he started tokenproof. But the idea of, for an example, one of his clients, Adidas, who has entrusted him to figure out new ways to deepen the connections with their customers in ways that actually reward the customers in more deep ways. And I think that's something you don't hear a lot from brands. And I think that's really special too. And then I think with Ariel and her team, who I'm big fans of, as she knows, but I think, you know, every one of us can probably admit that there will only be more digital assets from this moment forward. And that's sort of a zero, that's a sort of a full stop sentence. There is no way we're going to have less. And if we're having more, we have to value them, we have to be secure about them, and there's no one better in the business, in my opinion, than what Ledger is doing to try to do that, while also being like, hey, Snoop, let's play, right? Or Fendi, let's play, and let's create, like, let's make it fashion. Like, there's so many great things that these guys are doing that I think help bring us to ways in which this will take form, again, but none of us probably know. So I want to frame that as part of this conversation, which is, we are here to talk about blockchains, we're here to talk about brands, and we're here to talk about loyalty, but I would love for us to talk as big as you guys want to be, or as in the minutia as you guys want to be, that help us get something into the minds of here, and you guys feel free to shout at us if you need to, if you disagree, but that I think we have a responsibility to ourselves, to us, and to you guys to figure out the way that we can do this together and know it's going to take a long time, right? And be comfortable that it's going to take a long time. So that's sort of what I'm interested in getting out of this panel. Hopefully you were interested in those things too. I'm going to start, Devan, with you. I know you've been at Google for lifetimes. So I would love for you to give us your like 45-second origin story.
All right, well, hey, amazing intro, and great to be up on stage with such esteemed colleagues here in the Web3 space. So the 40-second version now. Yeah, been at, show my age, been at Google about 20 years. Originally started building data centers, and really we got to the point where as we built our search engine, we realized, hey, we have to crawl the entire internet. How do we do that? We have to get a lot of servers. How do we get servers? Well, we have to build our own servers. So we quickly adopted kind of a DIY approach, be scrappy. We adopted open source and just kind of grew from there. 10 seconds left, Web3 origin story. I live in Singapore, and Singapore is very much a hot zone. When I was there 2016, 2017 with crypto, happy to riff more on that. But yeah, just been deep into Web3 space for about 6-7 years now, and just driven by a lot of interesting narratives. Love to get into it more, but yeah.
All right. Fonz, your 45-second.
Yeah, so started tokenproof last year in January. It's a pivot from another business where we help people prove their health status through cryptography and QR codes, and then it was a failed venture, so I shut it down, and then I came into the NFT space just as a collector and bought a bunch of tokens, mainly worth zero now. But I noticed that when I went to NFT NYC last year, or 2021, there wasn't really a practical mechanism for me to prove that I own these NFTs in a safe way. And eventually we ended up pivoting that technology so that you can prove that you own whatever's in your wallet through a mix of QR codes and cryptography. And we also have an online authentication product. And so now it's evolved to providing a platform for brands to create significant utility to their holders and their tokens that they issue. And so we're servicing brands like Adidas, but also Yuga Labs and Puma and you know, big brands that want to come into the space and really connect their tokens, especially to the real world, to give special access and exclusive access to their holders.
And Ariel.
Well, first of all, thank you again for having us all, because I agree. I think there is no future in digital goods without the types of players that are on stage, including Sam, because you can't have that without quality journalism and news, and also his brain. But so it's really a pleasure. So I'm Ariel. I run all global communications and marketing at Ledger. We're the world's most secure way to handle all of your digital assets. And the most important thing that I would want you to think about is, if you ask most younger people today how they talk on the phone, they put up their hand. And if you ask some of us on stage, we might go like this. If you said, how do I prove my identity? People would probably say a passport or an ID. But if you ask other people, they'd say, oh, my identity is so many things. It's my login to my Gmail. It's the way that I show up with my, you know, my PFP. It's my login to my Farfetch account. It's whatever it is. It's my TikTok, right? But you don't actually own those things. And most of the hardware and services that exist today have not adopted to be as secure as it needs to be, because when they were invented, you did not need to have the same security or ability to have ownership and control as you do now. And so Ledger's job now and into the future is to be that secure partner in order to enable your digital life, and we make you feel comfortable and have that peace of mind, and work with incredible platforms from everyone to Celo to different, fashion and cultural ones, as Sam mentioned, all the way to certain things that we're building within Android and OS for our proprietary operating system. So very excited for the conversation today and understand that it really does go high, medium, and low in terms of how you achieve it.
Amazing. So the first way I'm going to challenge all three of you is, I'm going to say this because I believe it, but I don't think that we talk about this enough as a collective group, and the group being all of us. I don't look at Web3, especially Web3 on the blockchain, as a foregone conclusion. I don't look that it's going to happen. I look that the opportunity is there, that it's going to happen, but I think it's going to take a lot of things to make this stuff we're all building, plus blockchains, plus users, equals something that truly changes the world and has value. So with that, I would say, Devan, let's start with you. What are the areas of blockchain, or what are the areas of Web3, and those don't have to be the same, are you most interested, are you exploring both personally and maybe even within the career you're in?
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks, Sam, and thanks for framing it in terms of personal and professional. Love to answer both. So first off, with my Google hat on, I do feel that I agree, the Web3 space is evolving, right? And I think if we just boil it down to the computer science primitives here, it's really this idea of information, right? And it's this concept of open information, transparent information, intent, narratives, and we could go down information theory in terms of what that means, but it's fascinating. And the fact that you have these 24/7 economic markets running in compute, where people can store a proof of intent or proof of history, gets interesting. So from the Google side, we look at it similar to our current mission, right? It's to organize the world's information, make it accessible and useful anywhere, any device. So it's very much along that theme. But to clarify, I'm on part of the Google Cloud team, and we're on the infrastructure business, where we're picks and shovels, right? And our job and our customers and our partners are really passionate about running systems with high uptime, durability, et cetera. And to Fonz's point, I mean, this boils up into Web3 pretty quickly. I'm not sure if anyone here is a JPEG collector at all, but you have things called gas wars, right? Where NFT drops hit and these blockchains slow down. But it also slows down in a Web 2 sense. Where's that website? Is it getting DDoSed? Is it getting hacked? And that ties back into Web 2 in terms of the real world. So I could go on that, but that's where we think of it from the infrastructure side. How can we help with infrastructure? And how can we help with that transparency in terms of helping index that data and just make it accessible? I would argue Web3 is still early in a sense that you have to be a shadowy supercoder to really make sense of what's happening. And again, I think just back to this panel, excellent choice, because it's also about the usability, right? What does it mean for the user? And I guess the 10-second version on the personal side, I could argue actually I'm a big customer. So both my Ledger and my tokenproof app, love the experience. I mean, we could talk about real world events and just all the stories here, but on the personal side, I think it's also just fascinating in terms of being able to really just dig into culture. And maybe the last comment, I think the broader narrative is Web3 is built on open source, which underpins open culture. And that's where I'm probably most excited.
Fonz, what are the areas that are most interesting to you in the Web3 ecosystem right now?
So I think that I have so many thoughts, but it's important to realize that we're so early. And I know it's cliche to say it, but I think in 21, especially 2021, we had unrealistic expectations when Jay-Z had a punk, and when Snoop had an ape, and when Jimmy Fallon bought another ape, and then there was an expectation that Web3 was going to be everywhere in 6 months, and that was totally unrealistic. And then, there was a bit of a dip and a crypto crash, and we shouldn't be scared about that, but we also shouldn't take Web3 for granted, because a lot of the brands like Starbucks and Nike and Adidas, what they're doing is meaningful, but it's still an experiment, right? They haven't rolled their Web3 activities wide enough to their entire customer base. And I think we're going to start seeing more signs of that, but we all have to realize that we're still early. And I don't even know that Web3 is going to exist as Web3 in the next few years, right? I think terms are going to change. And what I'm excited about is, Sam, what you said about how do we onboard the next 100 million users. I think it's going to be by onboarding them without them really even knowing that they're being onboarded. It's going to be such a smooth UX and the technology behind the scenes where it's just natural, and they don't even call it NFTs or ERC 721s or 20s or whatever. All these technical terms are probably going to go away, and it's going to seem way more natural. So I'm excited about that evolution as to how to make it easier for my dad, my mom, make it, you know, very, very seamless and easy to use. That's what I'm excited about.
And Ariel, I want to answer the question, but I also want you to respond to what Fonz said in response to they may not even know they're being onboarded and how that may affect your business.
It's a good question. I would say a lot of the work that Ledger's done about making cultural relationships, because cultural authority builds product authority, is such that that partner, that cultural force, does the onboarding of the topic for you so that you don't feel so foreign in existence. I would argue that we as an industry got very good at attention capture, and where we need to do much more work is around the pipeline building. That's why I think ETHCC is a great time for this discussion, because if you get people excited about a topic, about an image, about celebrities, about all of these ways to get involved, but then you don't know what to do next, the drop-off point is really strong. And for us, a huge part of our onboarding, you know, we secure over 20% of the world's Bitcoin, over 30% of NFTs, and the reality is most people purchase that thing and then they come to Ledger because they learn and they get scared. And our biggest goal is getting a Ledger and then getting that asset afterwards. And I think that's about going wider. Like if you think about what we're professionally interested in, you could use your Ledger right now and go to your government website with the US and actually use it as your two-factor authenticator. And there are certain things where with the introduction of AI, you know, that creates abundance and cryptography is scarcity. And so Ledger will actually be more important in that process. And so my hope, our success will be that you won't need as cumbersome of an onboarding experience. And I think that's coupled by many factors, right? That's also why we invest heavily in education. Any educated person becomes a Ledger customer, but also because this education isn't just about Web3, it's about the future of financial literacy. So to me, what Fonz was saying is correct, but I think we have to think about it from different sectors, because if you have a whole marketing initiative and then you don't know what the utility is, that's where we kind of got lost over the last 6 months. And if you look at Ticketmaster, which has quietly given customers over 20, I think it's like 20 or 30 million NFTs, that's where we'll see the next wave, okay? Like what's actually happening there? What are we doing? You know, if it's easier for me to get into something with my token-proof app than it is for me to actually go through and cross a border, we have a problem there. And there's a lot there to unpack.
So it sounds like, if I can interpret and bias this next statement, but the digital JPEGs are not the future of where Web3 is. It was what got a lot of attention. Where my head goes is gaming, digital identity, sort of extremely fast real-world payments, especially in areas of need, and the idea of sort of tokenization of real-world assets and digital assets, and that those being seamless ecosystems. Are those the areas that you guys think, and you can, again, agree or not or disagree, are where our true growth areas are, and back to the name of this title, where the brands of tomorrow will be coming out of Web3? Fonz?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that JPEGs are not the future. I think the way that we have shaped the JPEG culture is not the future, because if you think about the younger generations that are interacting daily with Fortnite and Roblox, their digital identity is how they look in those metaverses, right? And so it's even more important to them how they look digitally than how they look physically, and so that tells you a lot. And so I think, like, my ape is my identity online, right? And I'm not going to change that in a long time, hopefully. But this wave and this notion of speculating with these assets is not the way, and that has been very toxic for the space. So I think all of this speculation needs to go away, and we have to focus on more of the identity play that there is, because it's huge.
Devan, what do you think is sort of the big area you're paying attention to that may not be, again, NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, just plus 100 to Fonz's points, in terms of JPEGs, I'd also offer a spin on that, which, at least personally, I do feel JPEGs, or the concept of media having, becoming a store of value, or becoming a store of provenance of some sort. And of course, you can unpack that into many use cases, but I do agree, if you look at the wave of Web3, we look at it in 3 different segments, right? You have the crypto edge of the spectrum, kind of the ultraviolet side. As you get in the middle wavelengths, you have gaming, right? And I'd argue on the very far left, or very far right, you have this whole spectrum of culture and retail, right? So I feel the crypto aspect, and much longer conversation there, but I think that's going through some tough times right now for very obvious reasons. But this other 2/3 of the space where digital scarcity really just underpins media and our day-to-day life in terms of ones and zeros, I do agree that that spectrum is what will really build onto this space in due time. But I think that's the space that is quite interesting to watch. One other element, not to get just too far off track here, but to your question, Sam, in terms of other areas that we're looking at, data is a big one, right? And it's great that we're here with the Celo event. Celo is a partner of ours, and we partner with Celo for startup programs. And I do think in a world of a multi-chain world where you have this activity, again, digital activity happening 24/7, the concept of how do you extract that data, find those insights, find intelligence, I think that'll also be quite important. And to Fonz and Ariel's point around how do you find the activity? How do you find suspicious activity? How do you find, how do you balance trust? And maybe the last point I personally just find fascinating is the idea of, again, if JPEGs or ones and zeros are digitally scarce, you will, I think, soon in the next 5 years or so, see capital markets form based on that digitized culture. And we're seeing it now in a space called NFT finance, where you have people making perpetual protocols, perp, shorts. You have people making loan protocols where you can take loans on your JPEGs. And these are permissionless markets. Again, right now it's just about apes or punks or whatever it might be. But I do think in a world where you have capital markets based on these digital objects, it gets really interesting, right? I could go on, but I'll close on that one.
Ariel?
I'm kind of waiting, I mean, maybe because also we're platform agnostic, but for more of the interoperability. Like, more of the businesses that have emerged over the last year are thinking mainly about their own purposes, and then the larger brands that exist have built a lot and then just think, how can I use this almost like a rewards marketing tool, versus how does this build into my business now? Am I building a business that can feed into something else? And that's why I thought, the Threads announcement was sort of interesting, because I'm like, okay, is this actually a tease into this for the future? But, if I could do that, then there's a future where I can use my Google Drive, which I already have a huge amount of my life in. I can tie it to something that is already for my experiential life. And then maybe when I'm moving and I want to buy a house, and this is very future forward, but it's an alternative to the credit score, because I have different ways of verifying my identity and my value and my livelihood. And I believe until we decide together on more global practices, then we'll be segmented, and that's where the regulatory impact will continue to stay very strong. And I would also say, to the data point, we cannot assume that the way that we collect data for customers in the future is the same as it is today, because all that is fear and anxiety-based purchase, where we're scraping from people to try and suck information out of them forever. And Web3 in a decentralized manner, in my opinion, should not be for that purpose.
Okay, so let's sort of switch to loyalty for a second, since you brought it up, and kind of in our last topic group. We've run campaigns on Coindesk. We've sold consensus tickets as NFTs. I was able to scrape every wallet that bought one. And I was able to tell a tremendous amount about the people who came in. Probably different stuff than Google knows, right? But frankly, a lot more exposing things than Google knows because this is a trustless and transparent environment. I knew at least the digital net worth of these people. I knew whether or not they had a crypto dick butt. I knew whether or not they were doing swaps. I knew what DAOs they were a part of. And that was something that me as a media brand was able to garner simply because they bought a ticket from me. And I guess I wonder, and Devan, I'll start with you. Loyalty comes with and I think you mentioned a kind of sense of trust, right? My Delta account knows enough about me of the kinds of things I want rewards, but also Delta isn't necessarily turning that around and letting United, run a similar data scrape on me, whereas I can run everyone who holds a Ledger NFT a report that tells me every asset that those people hold. Mm-hmm. So when we think of loyalty, are we thinking correctly? And again, Devan, give us your 30 seconds of, are we over-promising on the data side when we talk about that this is a transparent system and that our data should be ownable when anyone can actually check any of the data at any time?
Yeah, great question, and keeping it short. Yeah, I do think by default, everything's open, right? And a lot of that is probably just a rush to market as users figured out the space and experimented. And you're absolutely right. We all leave breadcrumb trails on these wallets, and each of us on stage, and I'm sure in the audience, you make a decision in terms of the wallet you have. Will you dox yourself, right? Are you going to publish that, hey, this is my on-chain identity? And that's an interesting situation because I would argue in the traditional sense, you might not have that choice, right, to choose that path. And there are some fascinating startups building on-chain identity tools where you can look up anyone's address and you can see almost their GGen score or their friends network. I mean, you can go deeper than just what they own and narratives. So, but I do think it's early, and I think the industry lacks practices, and consumers, I would argue, also might not be so educated in terms of the digital dust that they're leaving. But yeah, by default, it's open, permissionless, and public. So I do think as an industry, it's important to raise awareness and the best practice, and to the point around Ledger in terms of education, that's incredibly important.
And Fonz, as someone who has to handle all this data, right, through all the different systems, how are you thinking about how do we keep our data ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, number one, as Ariel said it, there's going to be more digital assets tomorrow than there are today, and that's only going to compound, and it's going to be exponential growth. Number two, none of this matters unless we own those digital assets. And the only way to really ensure that we own those digital assets is to have something like a ledger, and preferably a ledger. Number three, we are over-promising on the data side because everybody talks about how to target somebody based on their on-chain identity. But my on-chain identity is highly fragmented because I go to Nike.swoosh and I get a wallet. Then I go to Starbucks and I get another wallet. And then I have my MetaMask, I have my Ledger, I have like 15 different wallets now. But the problem with those wallets that I'm being issued from Nike and Starbucks is that I can't really, at this point at least, I can't really take them out, right? And so if a marketer wants to target somebody based on the combined ownership of a CryptoPunk, a Nike.swoosh asset, and a Starbucks Odyssey stamp, it's absolutely impossible today. And so that is a challenge that needs to be solved. We are thinking about it from the token-proof point of view because we allow individuals to link as many wallets as necessary, both custodial, non-custodial, ledger, non-ledger. And so in a way, we could be that aggregator so that you can have your entire on-chain identity in one place. But then how do we connect marketers to that data is something that we need to be careful about.
And the final word, Ariel, any thoughts on identity and data?
Oh, well, Ledger doesn't take customer data. When you buy a Ledger, we'll hold your information for the shortest period possible, and then we release it. And so for us, it's actually really important. We'll never change that. It does mean and make it more complicated for us to understand our customer base. And to that point, understanding that someone has an ETH account and does X, Y, and Z. And by the way, if you plug in a new phone to your ledger, you might be a different device than one we had known about before. And so we have a very different relationship to data, and we like that challenge. It also is part of why we work with certain partners and communities, because that way we know we're reaching a certain type of community that we want across the sector to help us expand our customer base. I would say for the future in data, we see it very much as wallet-to-wallet communication and wallet-to-wallet ecosystems are so essential. And I think, again, that's why I go back to the core point of why most of us are in town this week for developers, because the more that we can be thinking about open and secure systems, the more we'll have more options to talk about data. And I also do really appreciate, having Google on the stage. It's a very different conversation than what you're having with Apple today. And that's incredibly essential when there is unavoidable duopolies in the space. So it's really incredible to think about that opportunity as we carve out data futures and practices together.
We have to wrap up, Fonz. So unless it's 10 seconds.
I just wanted to say that there was a massive shift in policy this week by Google, and maybe you want to give like 5 seconds on it, now allowing NFTs in the App Store.
Yeah, hard to compress in 10 seconds, but yeah, we made an announcement really just around the clarity, right? That, hey, that we're aware of this space, and the broader narratives are there, right? And I mean, different department of where I'm at, of course, but yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, this question of Web3 is being cast out very far and wide right now.
Your turn, Apple.
All right. So with that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you guys so much. Google, tokenproof, Ledger, come hang out, say hi to these guys.
Coindesk.
And thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.